Good Tuesday afternoon to you. It's 4 o'clock. Time for Sports4CLE. Hope you're having a great day. Plenty of Browns to talk about a little bit later in the show. Brad Ward from BrownsWire.com, the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast, will join us. And we begin by talking Browns as well. So tonight, 10 o'clock, HBO's Real Sports will have an interview where we'll hear from two of the accusers in the Deshaun Watson civil case, two of the 22. And excerpts have come out. Here, Mary Kay Cabot shows us some of the excerpts from Ashley Solis and Kayla Hayes. And you see Solis describes the way she is working as a masseuse, and then puts his hands down there, and immediately she starts crying, told him she's done. And you see Kayla Hayes also describing some of the things that are deemed inappropriate. So the question was posed to Leah Graham by Soledad O'Brien, who is the reporter on this piece on HBO's Real Sports. To be innocent, 22 women would have to be lying. Why would the public believe one man versus 22 women? The answer by, again, Leah Graham, who is part of the defense team for Deshaun Watson. 22 women, it's one lawyer. There's only one lawyer who was willing to take these cases. And as we know from Ashley Solis's deposition, Mr. Busby was not the first, probably not the second or third, but he was the only one willing to take the case. Why? Not because of its merit, but because he was going to use the cause to increase the social media following and, quite frankly, get on shows like this one, so basically to garner the attention. With that, let's welcome in Tim Bielik. So, Tim, you've had a chance to read over some of those transcripts as well. Again, this is something that's it's all based on, the court of public opinion at this point, if you will.
Yeah, and I mean, it's going to be hard to imagine that, this segment on Real Sports tonight is going to look good for Deshaun Watson or in the Browns' favor. This is, it's obviously going to be a difficult, tough night. There's going to be a lot of things that are said by the two people involved in these lawsuits against Deshaun Watson. So it's going to be uncomfortable, I would imagine. But, we've heard a lot. Certainly, the last few months, like you said, it's the court of a public opinion. And right now, Deshaun Watson is losing that. Whether or not that is kind of how this plays out is, just something we'll have to watch in the next few months. But certainly, there is some pressure behind, there could be some pressure involved with this, to try and get Deshaun Watson to settle these cases before football season. Because remember, if there's no settlement, these trials do not get heard during the football season. So the latest activity would continue in this is March of 2023. And we're talking, that's almost 10 months from now. So that's a long time. So certainly, this is going to be, a tough watch for Browns fans. But, I would imagine the longer this goes on, the uglier it could get. And, they could be trying to put more pressure on Deshaun Watson and his team to have to settle. But, we really haven't heard a whole lot from Watson's team until just the last couple of days. Yeah, and along those lines, we will kind of hear more from Deshaun Watson. So Deshaun Watson declined to be interviewed for the piece tonight on HBO's Real Sports. But earlier this week, his lead defense attorney, Rusty Hardin, was on the Between the Lines podcast, and it's about sports and law. Hardin gave an update as to where this investigation is.
I've talked to the NFL for a total of 3 days so far. I think by the time this is over, these will be the longest interviews in the history of the NFL of anybody that they're investigating. They've indicated they want to continue to do some more questioning. And so that portion is still ongoing because as of yesterday, they felt like they hadn't gone through everyone. So that's pending. I don't have a deadline. I suspect the NFL wants to conclude their investigation sometime this summer, but whether that is June or whether that's August or July, I have no idea. That's their schedule. What happens mechanically is that the investigators will make a recommendation to Goodell. They will issue their findings. We will have an opportunity to respond to their findings. And then Mr. Goodell will decide what punishment, if any, they are going to recommend or what they're going to offer. We will decide whether we accept that or whether we want a hearing before the independent arbitrator, who now is truly independent. She is a retired federal judge, and it's a much fairer process, ultimately, I think, than was previously the case. These are changes that were in the collective bargaining agreement.
So Harden, in that same podcast, Tim, also made the point several times that he and Deshaun Watson's cooperation with the NFL is unprecedented. Here's again Rusty Harden from that podcast.
He's been interviewed adversely for 3 days, and there are no rules of evidence, and there are no rules of what you can't ask. So you take the average citizen and put him in, and trained former prosecutors, no matter how professional they may be, are free to ask him anything they want. And that's what he just spent 3 days doing.
And are you at that point able to object, or are you able to advise him not to answer?
That's a good question. Maybe I should put my malpractice carrier on notice, because I didn't object to any of the questions. I didn't tell him, as your question implies, conduct it like a deposition where you can instruct your client not to answer. We have said from the beginning that we were going to fully cooperate with the NFL at the same time we would cooperate with everybody. I think they would have to admit that we have more fully cooperated than anyone in the history of the NFL.
And again, Tim, let's put in perspective, this is Deshaun Watson's defense attorney, his lead defense attorney. So this is being painted under those eyes.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously anything Rusty Harden says, we have to take with a grain of salt, both sides of this whole thing. I think that's the reality. Is I think we have to understand, and we have to get used to, for however long this takes. There's the two sides of the trial, the plaintiff and the defense, and the reality is going to be somewhere in the middle. But I think it behooves Deshaun Watson to cooperate with the NFL investigation if he truly believes that he didn't do anything wrong, and he said so as much. Back in his introductory press conference a few months ago, he said he believes he's innocent. He believes he doesn't need counseling, therapy, any of that stuff. If he truly believes that, then he should be cooperating with the NFL fully. And Rusty Harden also brought up an interesting point when it comes down to potential suspension for Deshaun Watson. Is it's not directly in Roger Goodell's hands. It's in the hands of the independent arbitrator. So I think anything in terms of like a potential track record, what we've seen with several players that have had suspensions or whatever, those were handed down by Roger Goodell. This is a completely different path we're down. So this is more of the test trial of this new system in which, players can be punished through the personal conduct policy. So we don't really know how this is going to play out. But, I think it would obviously be in the best interest, I think, of the Browns and the NFL, just have some kind of resolution before training camp so the Browns can go into camp, whether knowing one way or the other, whether Deshaun Watson is going to be able to start week 1, or if they have to go with Jacoby Brissett, for 4 to 6 to 8 games, potentially even an entire season. We don't know how long that could be because, again, we have no track record. But, the earlier the NFL gets out with this, the earlier the NFL could complete this thorough investigation, the better it's going to be for everybody involved. And we're just going to have to see. It's just kind of a waiting pattern. It's just going to come down to all the evidence, the investigators find, and ultimately what the independent arbitrator decides.
So the thing that will get Deshaun Watson suspended, if he is suspended, it is violating the personal conduct code. Now, the commissioner has really wide authority in applying that. But here's Rusty Harden's take on possible violations of that code by his client, Deshaun Watson. Again, this is Deshaun Watson's defense attorney talking.
There's no appeal for either side if she finds no offense. And I have always believed very strongly that the conduct that he's accused of, that applies to the code of conduct, that the only conduct he's accused of that would create a violation of the code of conduct, the first two, which I don't have in front of me, but essentially they involve some allegation of forcible sexual activity. And as I think everybody knows, I've said what little sexual activity did occur was consensual. And there are only 3 occasions in our case that any type of sexual activity occurred. And that's 3 out of 22 of the massages. And that sexual activity was consensual. And so, and the grand jury, it's important for everybody to remember, the grand jury actions should put that to risk, because 2 of the 3 women that made plaintiff allegations, cases were presented to the grand jury, and the grand jury returned no bills. One of the things, Gabe, that's been frustrating about this, people haven't realized what these no bills mean. A no bill means they cannot find probable cause that there is any evidence of a criminal conduct.
And again, that is his take on the potential suspension for violating the code of conduct. And it's important to note, he is a defense attorney, and the NFL has shown what a court of law believes is not what the league follows.
Yeah, exactly. When you talk about the personal conduct policy with the NFL, it's separate from law. It's different from laws. I mean, the laws are something we all have to obey. When it comes to personal conduct policy, it's basically the equivalent of, anything an employer, has, set forth for you for rules as far as, you have to follow these things in order to continue to work at our place of business. You have to follow these things. And, the NFL might have stricter standards in those regards than obviously a court of law would. I mean, that's the thing, is just because, Deshaun Watson, was not indicted, that all these cases got no bills, in these grand juries in the state of Texas, that doesn't mean he's off the hook completely. I mean, when we've seen, NFL suspensions under Roger Goodell, obviously, the personal conduct policy means he's trying to hold these players they're trying to hold the players up to a higher standard. That just because you're in the NFL doesn't mean you have to follow certain things to a higher level, that you have to hit a certain level of conduct off the football field. Otherwise, there's going to be punishment for that. And I think that's just based on precedent. We've seen that throughout Roger Goodell's tenure, that he's been very strict about that if you kind of stray away from that, you're probably going to get that there's a chance you get fined and probably suspended. I mean, we've seen plenty of times players haven't been charged for things and they've still been suspended. So we're talking a completely different set of rules here when it comes to the NFL and suspensions and how long a player could be out for. But again, we're also talking about, in this case, an independent arbitrator evaluating these things, which means, again, we're going down a whole new path here as compared to, the first 10, 15 or so years where Roger Goodell has been the commissioner and essentially has had final say in all of these cases.
Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, organized team activities began today. We'll dive into that. Sports4CLE, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from cleveland.com, as well as the Plain Dealer. Organized team activities started out in Berea today. Baker Mayfield obviously won't be there. They're not mandatory. They're voluntary. That's not a surprise. What do you think the Browns hope to get done? Typically, what do they want to get done in these OTAs?
I would think it'd want to be the start of Deshaun Watson starting to establish chemistry with these receivers. Obviously, there's a couple new faces in there, particularly with Amari Cooper and David Bell and the receiving core alongside Donovan Peoples-Jones and Anthony Schwartz, who are going into their third and second year in Kevin Stefanski's system, respectively. So it's just it's the kind of the beginning of the on-field chemistry I would imagine the Browns are hoping to get out of these workouts. I mean, we obviously saw some of the photos out from the Bahamas where Deshaun Watson treated his offensive teammates for a little vacation, try and get some off-field bonding, which we know was an issue for this team last season, that it really seemed disconnected. So if they could shore up the chemistry thing, off the field and on the field, there's always, that might be what the Browns are hoping for, is, the key to turning things around and looking more like the team that everybody thought they were going to be heading into 2021, which was a Super Bowl contender.
All right, so over the weekend, signed Jadeveon Clowney, a one-year, $11 million deal with incentives that he can reach. How important do you think it was for them to re-sign Jadeveon Clowney?
It was massive. I mean, I don't think you could put, I don't think you can quantify it as much. The drop-off it would have been from Jadeveon Clowney being the defensive end if they had to start Chase Winovich or even Alex Wright on that defensive line opposite Myles Garrett. I mean, we saw when both Clowney and Garrett were in the game in 2021 last year that they really played off each other very well. Clowney obviously was tremendous as a run-stopping, edge-setting defensive end. 9 sacks last season, tied for the second best season in his NFL career. So obviously he kind of showed that he's a very high-end number 2 guy, and that, his physical tools and the way he plays the game really complement Myles Garrett very well. He has the size that if you want to kick him inside or Garrett inside for pass rush situations when you're trying to get something in the interior, you can certainly do that. And more importantly, it takes pressure off, like I said, Chase Winovich and Alex Wright. I mean, Winovich, you're still kind of waiting to see what he can get out of him, if he's just more of a rotational guy. And with Alex Wright, one of their third-round picks, I think he's a guy that you can play right away. I think he's got some rotational ability, but you kind of want to, let him grow into the NFL. Play him as much as you think he's comfortable playing. Let him grow. Let him learn from the veterans in front of him, because he's got the physical traits. I mean, he's got the build the Browns are clearly looking for on the defensive line at edge rusher. It just comes down to, learning a lot of things, moves, different counters, all those sorts of things that you need to learn, and learning the speed of the NFL. And by getting Clowney, you kind of push Alex Wright down that depth chart a little bit, which I think will inevitably be good for his growth.
This is kind of interesting as well. Pro Football Focus did tiers for the linebackers for 2022. Young and ascending. Tier number 6, top of that tier, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah in there with Roquan Smith. You see some of the other ones, Logan Wilson from the Bengals as well. Tier 9 is the best grade in coverage. Anthony Walker in there with Kyle Van Noy. When we talk about the Browns defense, one of the areas of concern is, the linebackers. Although JOK you have to like, and Anthony Walker probably didn't play as well as even he thought he would a season ago.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. I mean, with Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, I think we haven't seen the best of him. I think we haven't seen, what he's fully capable of doing. I know he really broke out in that game against the Bears in week 3. He was just one of many guys who really stood out and impressed, but he also missed quite a bit of time throughout the season. So, I would imagine, after a year of working with him, Joe Woods probably has a better idea of how to implement him best. And I get the feeling in 2022, you could see a very different player in JOK as far as a guy who's more impactful, a guy who can influence a game more than he did as a rookie. And I think there's a lot of untapped potential with there that I think is really going to start to show out, in the years to come. And with Anthony Walker, again, this is a young linebacking core. I mean, not just JOK, but you're looking at Jacob Phillips is still young. Sione Takitaki, only going to be in his 4th season this year. So bringing back Walker, I think, was a smart move, just to have a veteran presence, a guy who knows how to play. And obviously, what you showed in that screen grab, a very good grade in coverage according to Pro Football Focus. You need linebackers to cover these days. They're not the old classic 265-pound guys who just kind of let the running back run into them and tackle them for a gain of 2 or 3. These guys got to play sideline to sideline. They got to cover tight ends. In some cases, they got to cover slot receivers. So you better have linebackers that cover. And Walker, I think, is a guy who could do that. Plus, he brings that veteran leadership, of course, that I don't think you can have enough of on either side of the football.
All right, when you look at this roster as it's currently constructed, 89 of the 90 spots currently filled. What areas concern you?
I think defensive tackle, is really the concern. And maybe they go add another piece, like maybe an Akeem Hicks from the Bears, or even, I know there's some Browns fans that want Ndamukong Suh from the Buccaneers. I think either would be good additions, but I think part of the thing is you just don't know what you're getting out of that group right now. I mean, the most known quantity you have in that room, I think would probably be Sheldon Day. And, he's a good rotational piece, but I don't know if he's a guy you would build the interior defensive line around. I think this is going to be a big year for guys like Jordan Elliott and Tommy Togiai, who really haven't shown much, but I kind of take it as, defensive tackle is a position you really got to grow into. And those were both younger players when they were drafted. So they need extra time because, I mean, you're going in the middle of that defensive front. You're going up against grown men on the other side who have, played physical football for years. And it takes time to learn that. Maybe that's why I'm not as high on what Perion Winfrey can do as a rookie as some others. Maybe he surprises me and, carves out a bigger role. But the bottom line is, if the Browns don't sign one of those veteran defensive tackles in a free agency, they got to hope that someone emerges in training camp. Maybe it's Tommy Togiai, who I really like coming out of the draft a year ago because of his strength and the way he ascended throughout his career. I thought he played his best football at the end of his career, which stood out to me. Perion Winfrey certainly got a chance to make some flashes, but they really need somebody to come out of that group and kind of take the job as the number one guy and tell everybody else in the room, hey, guys, follow me. I got this. And right now, they don't have that guy, I don't think.
Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we look a little deeper into the roster makeup. A caller on our voicemail of Truth and Reason has a question. We will also take a look at some wide receiver rankings. Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to ohiolottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
Thanks for buying a fishing license. I want you to picture all of the great things this simple purchase does. Like building public boat ramps, keeping local waters clean, and maintaining a healthy fish population.
What's Mom doing?
When you buy a fishing license, you do a lot. Every dollar protects and maintains your local waterways for future generations to enjoy. Visit takemefishing.org.
We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Time to head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the composition of the 2022 roster for the Browns.
Hi, this is Ken from Snellville, Georgia. With all of the players the Browns have on the startup squad right now, what do you think will be the number of players per position when we roll into the active season? Thank you.
All right, Tim. So I guess the question is, where do you think they keep extra positions? What position group is really deep that you think they could, slide away from and keep an extra guy or two there?
I think, the position, if we know what, Joe Woods and the Browns have been looking for and trying to build their defense around, it's the ability to cover. So I would imagine, corner would be a position where, an extra body or two wouldn't be a bad way to go. I mean, they told us, with the selection of Martin Emerson as their first pick of the draft, that even though they have Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome, Greedy Williams, to a lesser extent, AJ Green, that there's no such thing as too many corners, even after trading Troy Hill. I mean, those are 5 guys that have the ability to play. Obviously we still got to see Martin Emerson, how he does, but what I think is clear in the AFC is this is a league full of tremendous quarterbacks the Browns are going to face, especially in their own division, where you got to play 2 games against Joe Burrow. You got to play 2 games against Lamar Jackson. You got to be able to cover. There's some really good receivers, really good quarterbacks, like I said, and you have to be able to counter that with guys who can cover. And that's certainly the model I think the Browns have tried to go for under Andrew Berry. I mean, obviously, drafting Greg Newsome in 2021 went a long way towards that. With Greedy Williams being in the last year of his rookie deal, makes sense obviously why they went and drafted Martin Emerson. But, they're testing the idea that you can't have too many corners, and you basically got to have them. If you're going to control anybody's pass game, you have to be able to have guys who can cover, and you have to have a bunch of those guys, and you have to have guys who are ready to go in case guys get hurt or guys, need a break or somewhere in the game because of just how fast everything's going to go. So that's the position I look for a lot of guys sticking around.
The other thing I would say is to answer the caller's question, the 51st, 52nd, 53rd guy are going to be guys they see as guys that can ascend into playing a position or being part of a rotational thing, but can contribute immediately on special teams. So in other words, a guy that can run down and cover kicks or punts, if he can play, if he's a running back, if it's forward and a running back, he's going to win out over a guy that's specifically position specific. Back end of the roster, special teams guys that make an impact on the game that way. That's something to keep an eye out for. This comes from Jack Duffin. It's also kind of interesting. Browns have 88 of their players filled. They were up to 89, and then they waived Felix Harper. So that his thought is it would be imminent that they have an idea of somebody, and this is once the signing of Jadeveon Clowney becomes official, it will be 89. So what are your thoughts? Do you think they have an eye on a free agent? What position, and who do you think it might be as that final roster spot?
It's tough to tell. I mean, we obviously do have some time before training camp to see how these things kind of sort out. They're going to just keeping that spot open in case there's a surprise cut or two before training camp. If a trade possibility kind of opens up, that's also something to watch. I mentioned if they were going to make a move, I would go for defensive tackle, a proven guy, like I said, and Akeem Hicks from the Bears, who I think, would be a great fit on this defensive front and really take a lot of pressure off some younger players. There's always it may not be as likely, but a receiver like Will Fuller would make a lot of sense just to have another veteran in there to kind of, help out Deshaun Watson, wherever's going to be a quarterback, a proven commodity at either of those positions, I think would be the smart way to go. But I think the reality is, we've seen Andrew Berry make some surprise moves in the last couple of years. So I think in some ways you have to be ready for anything. And again, like I said, we got 2 months till training camp. Really anything can happen. We know the NFL is unpredictable when it comes to transactions. I mean, guys become surprise cuts all the time. So maybe it's a waiting game till after June 1st to see who gets let go. And maybe the Browns want to pounce on one of those guys. Maybe it's a proven veteran. Maybe it's a younger guy that they really like. And they kind of want to see what he's got. So it's going to be, I'm fascinated how this is going to play out. I know it's one little roster spot, but you never know. If you have the opportunity to land a good player or a player you think can be good, it's certainly worth the risk and certainly worth an opportunity, certainly worth the flyer at this time of the year.
All right, this is also from Pro Football Focus, 2022 wide receiver rankings and tiers as well. So tier number 4, maybe not elite, but high-quality pass catchers. They have Amari Cooper at the top of that tier, number 22 overall. You think a fair grade? And again, Cooper isn't a guy that, lights up the stopwatch with his speed, but he's a really good route runner.
Yeah, that's his calling card, is his ability to run routes. I mean, it's part of, one of the archetypes I talked about when receivers. You have your elite speedsters, you have your physical forces, who are the guys that are like 6'3", 6'4", can just straight up out muscle any defensive back on his way to the football. And then you have your technicians, guys like Amari Cooper and Jarvis Landry, who they know how to get open. They have the quickness to get open. They know how to separate from coverage. They know how to manufacture space as a receiver. And ultimately, if you can do that as well as catch the football, you're going to have success no matter how fast you are. Now, let's not forget, Amari Cooper's got pretty good speed. Is he the fastest in the NFL? Definitely not, but I think he's got underrated speed at the position. That's why he's been productive. That's why he's been effective. That's why he's a good number one receiver. He's not an elite number one receiver. I think we've all discussed that, but I think he's a pretty legitimate number one who can be a good option for Deshaun Watson, for the next several years, or this year, whoever the quarterback is, week one or whenever, or however long that goes. But he's a legitimate number one guy, and I think, this ranking makes some pretty good sense there.
Tim Bielik and I are going to step aside, take one more timeout. Other side of the break, they rank the new NFL head coaches and quarterback tandems. We'll take a look at where Deshaun Watson and Kevin Stefanski rank. Sports for CLE. Be right back. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine. Tim Bielik and I continue talking Browns. So CBSSports.com ranked all 16 of the new quarterback head coaching combos throughout the NFL. Number one ranked Tom Brady and Todd Bowles. Man, that's a tough way to go if you're in that ranking. Tom Brady and anybody are probably going to be number one. Number two, Russell Wilson and Nathaniel Hackett with the Broncos. And number three, Deshaun Watson and Kevin Stefanski. It's very possible Watson and Stefanski will make multiple playoff runs together, especially if the latter gets back to the run-centric approach. But Watson's legal issues could derail the availability and or leadership both for now and the long haul. The only thing I somewhat disagree with there is I don't think the legal issues are going to have an effect on his leadership whatsoever. I think that's becoming pretty apparent.
Yeah, it seems like obviously from the Bahamas trip, there's some chemistry there that, Watson has started to establish with his new teammates. He's clearly working on that early on, but I think something that sticks out with Deshaun Watson that I don't think it's talked about for as good as he is, and I understand why he's kind of number three behind Tom Brady and Russell Wilson. Number one, both those guys have won Super Bowls. And number three, we also have to remember Deshaun Watson is relatively inexperienced. I actually just had to look at the numbers. Deshaun Watson's played in 54 games compared to the 60 that Baker Mayfield has played. And that's, of course, Watson missed most of his rookie season with a torn ACL, did not play in the 2021 season. So in some ways, Watson is still inexperienced. So we still have kind of got to see more of Deshaun Watson, how he continues to evolve, how he continues to play in these big pressure games now that he's got a better roster than he really had maybe at any point that he had in Houston, when he was there for those first four seasons that he played, particularly in 2020 when the roster was not very good. But also, I think we also have to recognize, this is going to be the first time Kevin Stefanski has had, top-notch quarterback play. I know Baker Mayfield has played at a pretty good level. Kevin Stefanski really did a good job at certain times helping Baker and certainly making things easier for him. And, it's going to be fascinating how he does now that he's got a quarterback who he maybe doesn't need to help as much, but can certainly make things easier for him in some ways. And Watson is the type of quarterback who can make offensive coordinators and play callers, head coaches, all of them look good, because those guys have the ability to turn bad plays that seem like they don't work into positive plays or even big plays. And when you have quarterbacks to do that, it makes their jobs much easier knowing that they kind of have a bigger margin for error when it comes to making those decisions.
So Bleacher Report did stat predictions for all the projected starting quarterbacks. Now, for the Browns, they project Jacoby Brissett to have 10 starts, 180 completions, 298 attempts, over 1,900 yards, 16 touchdowns, just 7 interceptions. He also had him running for 148 yards, 2 more touchdowns. If Jacoby Brissett starts 10 games and has 16 TDs, 7 picks, 2 more rushing touchdowns, the Browns are going to be okay in those 10 games because that defense is pretty good. And you also have Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt running the football. Those numbers, if those are legit, Jacoby Brissett's going to win a lot of games for the Browns.
Yeah, and I mean, with that running game, with that offensive line, with how good the defense is projected to be in 2022, maybe, obviously that makes his job easier. And with Jacoby Brissett, I mean, I'm kind of thinking he doesn't start that many games in 2022. We obviously kind of have to wait to see what the NFL rules in the next couple months, whether Deshaun Watson misses a bunch of games or whether a suspension is pushed back to 2023 or whatever. But the bottom line with Jacoby Brissett is I think, his talent level kind of falls somewhere between Baker Mayfield and Case Keenum. So I think it's kind of the middle ground between the two of them, where Brissett is not going to throw a lot of touchdowns. What his production is going to be dependent pretty much on the guys in front of him and the guys around him. Now, obviously, getting Amari Cooper is going to help. Obviously, with a receiver who's got the ability to separate like Cooper does, he can make a lot of quarterbacks look very good. I'm very high on David Bell and the contributions I think he can make out of the slot. Donovan Peoples-Jones, I think, has got a chance to take another step forward in 2022, along with David Njoku. You mentioned the running game. He doesn't need this. It's an offense where he won't need, if he starts, he won't need to be Superman. He'll just need to be kind of the point guard. Just, get the guys the football, just do what you can to kind of manage games, try and, just stay ahead of schedule. And like I talked about, Kevin Stefanski, calling plays certainly will give Jacoby Brissett a good chance to make things happen, make things a little easier, to help him out a little bit. He's not an elite level starting quarterback. I don't think anybody's going to say that he is, but he's a guy who can certainly start a bunch of games. And, like most quarterbacks are kind of average, maybe that upper tier backup quarterback, their success is kind of dependent on who they're playing with.
All right, let's take a look at some of the news coming out about Baker Mayfield. The first of these two is from Albert Breer from Monday Morning Quarterback, Sports Illustrated. 2 operative questions: whether Sam Darnold can build enough belief in those around him after the way last year went, how quickly Corral comes. This is the Panthers monitoring the Baker Mayfield situation, and Carolina can't answer either of those 2 questions just yet. But for Carolina to trade for Mayfield, his sense is the Browns would have to eat a healthy majority of that nearly $19 million in 2022. Goes on to say his understanding is that the Browns are already willing to take a good chunk of that on to facilitate a trade, and the trade may have already happened if they were willing to take on more. Panthers Wire is also tweeting about the quarterback position, and they are saying that they are open to signing Cam Newton for a smaller salary and would be considered as a guy competing for the starting job, not the starter coming into the year. All right, when you break all of that down, what is it? Does it sound like the Panthers are posturing, trying to talk the Browns down even lower, or is Cam Newton somebody they may turn to compete with Darnold and Corral?
Feels like posturing to me. I mean, it's hard for me to kind of imagine unless Carolina is really trying to do maybe not necessarily a stealth tank to try and get Bryce Young or CJ Stroud in 2023, but, not necessarily, maybe they're trying to flip the idea of, if Sam Darnold wants to be in Carolina in 2022, they basically are trying to say we're okay with that, we'll live with that, rather than, take a chance on Baker Mayfield. I think there's posturing involved. I mean, trades like this are negotiations. It's like a game of poker. You don't want to show all your cards. You want to try and make the other guy, want to try to bait the other guy to make a riskier decision than they want to. And right now the Browns don't seem like they're interested in paying way more of that contract than they have to. And again, there's no pressure necessarily to make that move. Again, 2 months or so till training camp. It's a question of, does Carolina really feel comfortable, with Sam Darnold and Matt Corral going into next season, maybe even Cam Newton, who we saw, come back in 2021, but really didn't show a whole lot that season? Or, for example, if Seattle really believes that Drew Lock and Geno Smith aren't the guys and maybe they decide to go forward. Who knows? It's going to be interesting to kind of watch, how this plays out over the next couple months. I feel like just based on this continued posturing that, it's going to take a while. It's taken a while. It's still going to take a while. Maybe the Browns get lucky and one of these teams really needs a quarterback and then they get a Sam Bradford-esque haul to an extent. I don't know if that happens just because Baker's an expiring contract, but this may be a case where it's looking like the Browns might have to lose the deal just to get some of that salary off so they can roll over at least a little portion of that into 2023 when they're going to need the cap space. So this is just, it's still just kind of a game of chicken right now.
Yep. The more it changes, the more it stays the same. The Browns have to play the waiting game with Baker Mayfield. Tim Bielik, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day.
You too. Tim Bielik. Make sure you read them. Pages of the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we continue talking Browns with Brad Ward from BrownsWire.com and the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast. We'll be right back.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students, kindergarten through 12th grade, can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education, where stars shine.
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams, I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
Tonight on HBO's Real Sports, 2 of the 22 accusers in those civil lawsuits for sexual misconduct against Deshaun Watson will be interviewed for the first time. Yesterday, or actually earlier in the week, Rusty Hardin, who is the lead defense attorney for Deshaun Watson, was on the Between the Lines, a podcast about sports and the law. He explained what it meant in his mind that no indictments were returned against his client, Deshaun Watson.
It wasn't that they declined. I mean, you instinctively used it, but you don't mean it that way. It wasn't that they declined to indict. They found there was no probable cause, that there was any evidence that he committed a crime, and therefore there was no indictment. In fact, Brazoria County did it a little bit differently. They decided not to bring any charges, not only any charges, but to have no official action by the grand jury through a no bill. And the prosecutor, the district attorney's office in Brazoria, which I think intellectually makes sense, says, look, if a grand jury finds that there's no evidence that a person committed a crime, a no bill still puts him or her into the system. There's an action. So that person will still have that the rest of their life. And so if we find that there was no crime, then we should not have the grand jury take any action. So the grand jury would choose not to act at all.
And again, we remind you, this is Rusty Hardin, the defense attorney for Deshaun Watson, the lead defense attorney. He talked on that same podcast about the biggest misconception that he's dealing with the whole Deshaun Watson case.
That there was this massive sexual activity going on him with massages, that he was trolling on massages on the internet to find people to have some kind of sexual activity with. The evidence is clearly, other than the women's allegations, which turned out to be unsupported, no telling anybody for a year, no report to law enforcement, all of them agreeing in their depositions. They never said to him in the event that they objected to what he was doing. There's only one woman that walked out before it was over, and that is Miss Solis, who was the first one. And that was like with 5 minutes left. And when she announced that she wasn't comfortable in the areas he wanted massaged, which is a whole different subject, the same areas for everybody. And they were areas that were recommended by his trainers for the Texans that he needed to have work on. She's the only one who walked out 5 minutes after. And when she said, I'm not comfortable with this, his response is, do you want to quit? And that's it. It was over. He paid her. They talked. He apologized if he had made her feel uncomfortable, and he left. That's the first lawsuit.
With that, let's welcome in Brad Ward from BrownsWire.com, as well as the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast. And again, Brad, I preface all that by saying it is the defense attorney, the lead defense attorney, so it's going to be heavily slanted toward Deshaun Watson.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Rusty, I listened to the whole podcast. Rusty's certainly an interesting guy. The most interesting thing I took away from the indictment part, I think, was he tied that to the NFL. So according to Hardin, he's saying that, there wasn't all this sexual activity. There was really just 3 allegations that would have, been in violation of the NFL's code of conduct, and using the word forcible. They're claiming that the evidence showed that those were consensual, or not enough evidence to show that they were forcible sexual acts. Therefore, there was no bill, there was no indictment. And in the 10 cases that were, or allegations that were put forth into the grand jury, 2 of those 3 cases that he's talking about being in violation of the NFL's code of conduct were dismissed or given no bill. And so he's basically saying, yeah, sure, the NFL can check up on this, but the grand jury basically already weighed in on this, and that should be enough for the NFL to dismiss those 2. And then he's saying the third one, the third accuser or allegation, is not credible. In the 3, according to Rusty, the 3 allegations that would be in violation of the NFL's code of conduct. I thought that was interesting. That's where he stands, and he feels that the grand jury has already cleared him of that by not indicting him.
Yeah, and again, we know that the NFL's code of conduct is it gives Roger Goodell a wide net to enforce it. All right, let's move on to some football. This is from Pro Football Focus. They're calling it Captain Checkdown. So lowest checkdown rates. And when you look at the lowest, Baker Mayfield checks in at 6. So Jalen Hurts 1, Tua Tagovailoa is 2. Mullins, Browns backup, is 3. Trubisky, Allen, Baker Mayfield 6. All right, now we flip that over. The highest checkdown rate, you got Mason Rudolph 1, Teddy Bridgewater 2, Taylor Heineke 3, and then you got Dak Prescott, Phillip Rivers at 6, Prescott at 7, and Deshaun Watson at 8. Those are kind of surprising, those last 3 in particular.
Yeah, I think that, when it comes to these lists are interesting, right? There's always going to be outliers. I think you're going to see some of these at like the highest checkdown rates. You're going to see some guys that are really good quarterbacks up towards the top because that's more part of the game. And then the same thing with the lowest checkdown rates. But names like Jalen Hurts and Tua and Nick Mullins and Trubisky on the lowest checkdown rates makes a lot of sense, right? You see Patrick Mahomes there at 7. That makes a lot of sense. What did every defense try to do to Patrick Mahomes this year? He couldn't curb his aggressiveness, right? So teams sat in 4 deep and 3 deep and made him try to take the check down or take what they were giving him. And when he did, the Chiefs were successful. They got really hot in the middle of the season, but it ultimately came back and bit him again in the postseason, where he couldn't just control that need to push the ball down the field. Now, on the other side of the page, there's guys that want to push the ball down the field all the time and won't take the check down. You have to find that middle ground, right? I thought it was interesting that on the highest check down rate, the best quarterback you see towards the top of that list is like Derek Carr, right, at 3. But that was interesting. A lot of these other guys like Mac Jones and Trevor Lawrence are rookies, so that's not so surprising, right? Or younger quarterbacks. Drew Brees, that makes sense to see him up there. But there are going to be good quarterbacks like Goff, and as we already mentioned, Derek Carr, who make that a part of their game, right? It would make sense to me, Dave, that the best quarterbacks would be found somewhere between 10 and 20, somewhere in the middle on both of these, right? You don't want to be at the top end of either of these, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'm with you. That means you're trying to let the play develop, but when it doesn't, you know when to say when. All right, before we go to break, this one is also kind of interesting. Sports4CLE ranks the top 5 dual threat quarterbacks in the NFL. Top 1 is Josh Allen, which was surprising. Number 2 is Deshaun Watson, ahead of Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, and Lamar Jackson. And again, that's dual threat, and that's one of the things that people might forget a little bit about Deshaun Watson because he hasn't played in a year, and we just delineated earlier in the show he hadn't played 60 games in the NFL yet.
Yeah, it's interesting that they put him all the way up at 2. This list is a little interesting. I was surprised to see Murray and Hurts over Lamar Jackson, especially Hurts. I thought Lamar Jackson would be higher on the list. And it's interesting that they just kind of throw Watson right back in there too, with the missed time and the, smaller sample size maybe. So it's an interesting list. I certainly think that Watson, when he is full go, no rust in the middle of a season or in the middle of his career where he hasn't had a large amount of time off or whatnot, would be a top 3 dual threat quarterback in the NFL. He certainly, for me, qualifies as that.
Yeah, it'll be fun to see as he gets back into the groove of things. Brad Ward and I are going to step aside, take a quick time out. Other side of the break, we head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, talk a little bit about Chase Winovich. Sports4CLE, he'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program recognizes role model students and teachers from across Ohio. Nominations can now be done completely online. To nominate a deserving teacher or student, go to OhioLottery.com. In the About section, find Partners in Education. There you will find links to the nomination forms. Students kindergarten through 12th grade can be academic all-stars. Teachers can be honored as a Teacher of the Month. The Ohio Lottery, partners in education, where stars shine. We continue talking Browns with Brad Ward from BrownsWire.com and the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the Browns coaching staff.
Hey, Dave. Thanks from Cleveland. Hey, do you think both Stefanski and Woods would be on the hot seat with all the talent they have assembled on both sides of the ball this year? And one more thing. You, Quincy Carrier, and G. Bush, we got to set up something at a pub for the Browns games, like a little tailgate party. You guys would pack it in. Love you. Later.
As always, appreciate the voicemails. That would definitely be fun. Brad, I don't really think if something goes horribly wrong, maybe one of those guys is on the hot seat. I think the Browns want some stability, and they think they have the right pieces in place.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think, Dave, that this is kind of situation-based, right? Like, so the suspension is going to have a lot to do with this, right? You know, ultimately, if he gets no games this year or 4 games this year and they end up under 500, I could certainly see the seat getting warmer, right? I don't think they're in a position where they could lose their job. But you could see the seat getting warmer 2 disappointing seasons in a row, especially with the new quarterback. And if it's a limited suspension, sure, I could see that. But I don't see them losing their jobs over it. But yeah, the seat could get a little warm if they had a disappointing season and Watson was there for, 75%, 80% of the games. That I could see it getting a little hot, but certainly not. I don't see any changes after the season regardless. I think you have to give this some time here, right? You've made these moves. You have finally some continuity, and the continuity is something they really need to build on and just kind of go with at the moment. I feel good about who they have in place. I think they do too. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think part of the problem, the reason you get to where the Browns were way back when is because you keep changing things. So I think they've found what they want in terms of front office, coach, and the coordinators. So we'll see. Akron Beacon Journal, interesting piece. Chase Winovich sees the trade to the Browns as possibly, quote, the best thing that has ever happened to him. What do you make of that?
You don't hear that very often. Chase is an interesting guy. I thought it was interesting. He's gained, 10, 15 pounds. He's very excited about playing in the 4-3. I mean, he did that just, to meet, what Joe Woods asked him to do to fit that 4-3 scheme as an edge rusher. He's going to kind of try to fill that Tack McKinley role, I think, right? Like, that's what they want from him. Now that we know Clowney's back. And I think he can do that, right? Like, he fell out of favor in New England. It makes sense that he wants to be someplace else to change the scenery. He was basically relegated to just special teams at the end of his time in New England. So a fresh start here in Cleveland, a chance to contribute off the edge. He certainly seems excited about taking that opportunity and running with it.
All right, OTAs underway out in Berea today. There will be some media availability tomorrow. What do you think the Browns need to get done? And again, there's not a lot going on here, but what do they want to, when they walk away from these OTAs, what are some of the things they want to be able to say?
They installed their offense and their defense, their base offense and their defense. I mean, so the defense, not so much, right? Because you're getting almost everybody back, but you're going to have some new guys and you're going to have some wrinkles. But the offense, you think, we're going to see some changes here, some big changes with the guy who is taking the snaps now, right? At most of the time. So whether it's him or Jacoby Brissett, we're still going to see those changes. So installing the cores of that offense, I think, is what OTAs is pretty much all about, right? Install this stuff, so that when guys go to their books and they go to their playbooks, they can envision, okay, we ran this, right? I can see it. I can see myself doing it. I think that stuff is key for OTAs. And then, you can add wrinkles and things like that the further they go along in the offseason program and stuff like that. But in core, the core offensive stuff is really important for this OTAs because of the new quarterback room.
Do you think it is too early to say, you want some chemistry and some camaraderie to be developed between Deshaun Watson, Jacoby Brissett, wide receivers, and that offense?
Never too early to say that, Dave. I don't think that's always got to be happening. They went on the trip and everything, the optics on that, whatever. But if it wasn't this situation, Dave, he would have been lauded for that, right? If he wasn't in the situation he was in, for taking his offense away and doing that. So it's interesting. As selfishly as a Browns fan, I love it, right? You want them to have that experience where they're away from everybody, the bonding, the camaraderie, the connection, right? That has to be made. And what makes good football teams is that sort of connection, right? So the Browns getting that done already and up into and through OTAs all the way through the offseason program will be certainly key, as it kind of was missing last year, I think. Yeah, I would agree. Brad Ward, as always, man, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Brad. Yep, Dave, you're the best, man. Thank you. All right, Brad Ward. Make sure you read him. Pages of brownswire.com. You can also listen to his podcast, the All Eyes on Cleveland podcast. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. See you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Scheduled guest Jeff Risdon from brownswire.com. That's tomorrow at 4. Browns OTAs continues. Have a great night, everybody. We'll see you tomorrow on Sports for CLE.